Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Writer's Edge. I'm your host, Christy Stratus, and tonight we're going to be talking about prolific writing. We're going to be talking about how to do it, strategies, and a whole lot of other things. So even though we have set topics, as always, leave your questions in the chat. We always have a really active chat, and I'll do my best to bring it up to the panel and get it answered. And if we don't have time, I will put it in the comments afterwards for our panelists to answer. So make sure you stay until the end so that you can hear our upcoming schedule, because it does include a change of schedule in November. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're not already, and hit the bell to get notifications when we go live or when we post a new video. So first, I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then I'm also going to introduce myself. So why don't we start with Sunshine?
Great. I'm Sunshine Somerville. I have 7 books at the moment. I'm working on 8, 9, 10 simultaneously. And yeah, so I'm happy to be here. I don't know if I'm prolific or not, but I will take the title.
I'm counting you as prolific. To me, you are prolific. How about you, Summer?
I'm Summer Lane, author of 18 best-selling novels, and I own Writing Bell Publishing. I've been publishing for about 5 years now, and my newest novel was a historical romance. Usually I write post-apocalyptic fiction, but I was branching out a little bit for this one, but that's kind of who I am.
That's great. Yeah, those are 2 really different genres.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay, next we have Joseph.
Hi, I'm Joseph Murphy. I'm the author of the Sword of Cassandra series and the Activation series and a Clive. Oh my God, I can't remember the name of the title. This is really bad. I read a series of paranormal thrillers as well. I've been published only for about 3 years now, and in the last 3 years, I put out 6 books.
Thanks. And on to Joshua.
My name is Joshua Robertson, and I'm just a guy that writes books. I have 17 publications now. I'm simultaneously working on 18 through 21 to get out by about February or so. They should all be done, and I'm excited to be here as always, Christy.
Thank you. I'm really glad you're here. Joshua was actually already on a panel tonight, so he's super popular tonight. And finally, Jay.
Hi, I'm Jay. I write as J.K. Nori. I write in a lot of different genres. I'm more focused on the deeper meaning of the story. I've always read in a lot of genres, and so I enjoy writing in different genres. I guess I'm the only one here that doesn't count my books. I'll have to do that and keep that number in my head. But yeah, always working on something and always looking to find the deeper meaning of whatever it is that I'm writing about. And I really want to say that I'm really glad that this is the topic tonight and that all you are here. I'm looking forward to hearing your insights on this. This is really cool. And also, I have a partner in publishing who does as much or more work than me. And if I didn't have her, then I couldn't be perceived as prolific. So shout out to Dawn. Thanks for having me on the panel.
Yeah, that's really nice. And, you know, if you guys in the audience want to like count the books behind Jay, I'm sure we could give you some kind of awesome prize so that you could know how many books he's published. Okay, and you know me, I am Christy Stratus, host of The Writer's Edge. I am the author of the Dark Victoriana collection, and that includes the books Anatomy of a Darkened Heart and Lock and Key. And this weekend, in fact, I'm going to be putting up a very short story. It's under 1,000 words on Wattpad, so be sure to check it out there. It's going to be an alternate ending to Cinderella. So without further ado, I'm just going to start in the questions. And like I said, please leave whatever questions you have in the chat. So we're going to start with the basics, and I would love to hear from each of you on this. What do you personally consider prolific? I consider all of you prolific, but everyone thinks of it differently. Is it 5 or more books? Is it 10? Is it more? And let's just start with that question.
First off, I want to say something because it's I know that this is one of my writer phobias, is that I always feel like I'm not prolific enough. I mean, you look at some writers and they only put out 1 or 2 books in their entire career. But for me, I always feel like I should be writing more than I am. I look at people like Isaac Asimov, and he wrote something in the neighborhood of 460 books in his life, which I don't know how that's possible. But if you put out 5 or 6 books a year for 40 or 50 years, I still don't think that's enough. But I think that's my goal. Is like I feel like I have to be performing at that level to consider myself prolific.
I think that's a really hard question to ask. Is like Joseph, I don't know that I would consider myself prolific by any means, and I think that'd be a hard thing to measure. For myself, I guess if I was looking for what could possibly categorize me in that is when people start recognizing me regularly, like outside my general circles. People start talking about my books and talking about my world, or I go to a con or an event, people will go, oh my God, that's Joshua Robertson, which is not the case right now. Right now I go to, cons and people go, I've never heard of you before. What do you write? And I got to explain what it is that I do and what I'm doing. So I don't know that I consider myself prolific, but I think if I ever reach a point where people can recognize me just based on the name of my books or on my author name, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that too. Just I think of prolific as anyone who writes more than I do. So, and someone who's constantly putting stuff out, whether that's every year or some people do it every month, which I don't know how they do that. But I think just someone who writes enough that you constantly see new stuff from them and kind of you can keep track of how often they're coming out with stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that being prolific isn't necessarily a number of books, but maybe how often you release a book. So like you're just staying at the forefront of your readers' minds. So, I mean, being prolific maybe is only 3 books, but if you're constantly putting out, one book here, maybe another book here, maybe not necessarily super fast, but people are like, oh yeah, I remember you, and then I remember you again. That's more, I think that's kind of more like what being prolific is, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's how many books you're putting out per year. The people that are putting out 2 to 6 books per year, that's who I consider prolific, depending on the length and the size of their books. But that's pretty much what my goal is to get to the point where I'm putting out 2 to 6 books a year regularly and making sure that, nobody forgets about me. And it seems very possible. So
yeah, that's the fear, isn't it, Jay, that you're going to be forgotten?
Absolutely.
Which is funny, Christy, because we were talking about this before you started, but like everyone on this panel, or almost everyone on this panel, like I've known you guys for 3 or 4 years. I mean, Jay's a great example. Me and Jay, I think we're sharing things back and forth on each other's blog almost 3 or 4 years ago, where we first met each other. And so in my mind, Jay's a prolific writer because he was there when I was just getting started and really start pushing stuff out. And,
yeah, right. I had like one book
then. Yeah, but to me, you published and I wasn't. So it was a huge deal to me just to be able to talk to you and know you. So it's all perception.
That's very true. And so along those lines, how much do you think is too much in terms of book publication, if there is such a thing? Is there oversaturation, or is it a matter of too often versus too many books over a lifetime? It's a tough one.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's such a thing as oversaturation, as long as the quality of the book is to a high standard. If people like a story, they'll keep coming back for it, so you can't really go wrong there. I think where it starts to get dicey is if you're just, putting a book out there just for the sake of putting a book out there, and the story is suffering, then that's your oversaturation point, I think.
Agree with that. I think when quality starts to fail, that's just, you need to stop and take longer with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree.
A lot of the authors that I like and that I'm admiring for being so prolific, they're putting out a book every other month, or sometimes they release books 3 or 4 months in a row, and they don't seem to be saturating their market. But I do know that a lot of people do pen names and stuff like that if they're going to write something similar but in a different series. But it seems to be a pretty popular choice to release things, to kind of save up 3 or 4 books and release them one right after the other these days, instead of like writing one, releasing it, writing the next one, releasing it. It seems to be a strong advice from a lot of people to save things up and release them all like within 30 to 60 days of each other.
Yeah, all of that makes sense. As long as the quality is there, then of course, I totally agree with that. And I know that there is such a thing as formula writing, and some people like that and some people don't. Some readers like that and some readers don't. But, you know, how do you keep the quality high when you're aiming to release a lot of books? And, you know, a lot of books are over what is considered by the traditional publishing market a short period of time. So like if you're releasing over 1 to 2 years, a lot of authors in the traditional market just do one book over that time. But what do you consider, like, how do you keep the quality high when you're going beyond that?
My advice is get good help. You need a good editor, you need good proofreaders, you need a good writing circle, get some good beta readers. Don't trust yourself, because I think that's the problem, is that some people think that they can skip steps. They think they can, you know, be their own editor or their own critique group, and you can't, period. You need help. I think you also need to know when to take breaks. Sometimes you know, this is something I'm struggling with right now, because I put too much on myself last year. I was doing too many things at the same time, and I kind of had to put the brakes on to say, I need to figure out exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I think that was good for my mental health. I think if I had kept putting out stuff just to put out stuff, the quality would have suffered, and then there goes your reputation. And I think that's very important. You want people to know that they can count on you for good quality material.
I absolutely agree.
That's building
Writing.
trust. Yeah.
Writing is really like any other profession, though. I mean, you get better at it as you do it more. You get faster at it as you do it more. You find tools. You listen to advice from other authors that are prolific and find the ways that they're getting things done and the things that they're doing to make sure that they're not wasting time or using time in excessive ways. And yeah, it helps a lot to really make it a point. And really, if anybody sat down for an 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and wrote that whole time, then they're going to be super prolific. It's just that very few people do that. And also, yeah, indie or traditional publishing decided that 1 or 2 books was a lot back in the day when people were on typewriters and using pads and paper. And I mean, Scrivener has halved that, and having laptops has cut that time in half. And yeah, being able to reach out to other people online that help you out, that's cut that in half. So there's really a lot of ways to get prolific if you want to be prolific, and not just keep that quality up, but improve that quality by building a good team and having good people around you and making sure that it's everything you want it to be.
Yeah, definitely having good people around you. I mean, I agree with everything you guys said. Having good people around you and that inspiration, that's where that comes from a lot of the time. Even if some people get writer's block, and sometimes the answer is really just talking to somebody who you admire, you know. And actually before this, Joshua was saying that he tries to keep like a balance of some people who he looks up to and things like that, to just have always someone there that is like the ideal, and you know what you were saying before, Joshua.
Yeah, which I'd love to share again. There's a lot of books out there that talk about the secret to success and building yourself up, and part of that is spending 30% of your time with people that you look up to, that you want to become like, spending 30% of your time with people that are at the same level or where you perceive to be at your same level, and then spend 30% of your time mentoring people that are trying to get maybe where you are at, and really balancing your time out in that way. And you see a lot of benefit from that. One, by mentoring other people, you remind yourself of the basics, things that you forget just in your day-to-day of like, oh yeah, I was talking to so-and-so about this, and I remember I should be doing this myself as well. Like I forgot to do this as often as I should. And people at your same level validate some of the things that you're already doing, and helps you guys kind of lift each other up. Which I know when I first started writing, I immediately got into writing groups of people that were at the same level as me, and we've grown together over the past few years, which has been really encouraging. And then finding people that are doing better than you are and letting them mentor you and give you some secrets about what works, what doesn't work, and new areas to look at improving your own work ethic, your own writing style, all those types of things.
Definitely. And as always, I think that if you're looking for advice online, it's always best to mix whatever makes the most sense to you instead of just taking whatever you come across. And I find that especially with anything like I mentioned, writer's block, not all the same things work for one person as work for the next, but it's the same in this case as well. It's not going to be the same for every person. And if you look at actually some of the biggest writers of our time, or even just throughout history, they all have such different techniques in their writing time and things like that, that you really can pick and choose like whatever advice works best for you. So then how many books do you guys tend to work on at a time? I know some of you work on a ton, some of you don't, and like I would love to know what there. Maybe you have an ideal and maybe you have what you always do, but how many books at a time usually?
I usually work on 2 projects at a time. I try not to do more than 3 because otherwise I get stretched a little bit too thin. So like I have one fiction project that I just finished, so now I'm moving on to the next one, and then I have a nonfiction. So right now I'm only working on 2. I've learned from past experience not to overextend myself. So I try to keep it between 2 and 3, never any more than that.
And just to throw in real quick, you said you're working on a fiction and a nonfiction at the same time. And are you finding that you like working better on 2 fictions at a time, or a fiction and a nonfiction?
You know, it's funny because this is the first nonfiction I've actually written like as a published writer, not just for myself, but to share with everybody else. So I do like the difference in the tone and the narrative. So it gives me a little bit of a break. So if I'm working on my fiction project and say I have a little bit of a writer's block, like, you know, then I can switch over to my nonfiction, which is a completely different planet, you know, and it kind of loosens my creative brain up a little bit so I can go back to the fiction project the next day and feel fresh.
I have always worked on one book at a time until just recently, and now I've taken on several at a time, and it's been a little overwhelming, to be honest.
How many, Joshua?
Yeah. Right now I think it's 5 that I'm doing right now at the same time. Which one of them I finished up, so I'm down to 4. One of them is now completed. But it's just, I've never bounced around like this before. Usually I sit down, I knock a book out in 22 to 26, 27 days, and then I move on to the next one. And right now I have so many deadlines coming up that I'm just constantly like swapping between documents and writing. Luckily, most of them are in the same world, so it's kind of feeding off of one another, but it's still overwhelming. I'm learning hard what Summer's talking about.
It's called burnout.
Yeah. but I took almost the whole summer off, so I have a lot of creativity like flowing right now. I haven't gotten exhausted, but I'm not sleeping much, and I'm drinking a lot of coffee.
Sounds like my life.
I only work on one project at a time, well, one book at a time, because I'm doing other things at this as well. I mean, I have a business as a cover designer, so I'm doing that. I work as an editor for a small publishing company. So even though I'm writing one book, I'm also editing someone else's book at the same time and working on cover art. Last year I was working on a magazine. So there were so many things that my brain kind of splintered off. I think that goes to focus. I think I had to, what I've done over the last year is figure out what's more important to me. And how can I say this? The way my mind works is I have to focus on one thing at a time for me to be very successful. Now, what I usually do is I write the first draft. As soon as the first draft is done, that goes off to critique groups or something like that. And then the minute that is gone, I can start working on the next one. I'm not going to sit around waiting for the work to come back to me. As soon as it's off to the critique group, I'm done. Then I can focus on something else. If you're looking at just a numbers game, and this is something that I think for new writers especially, that might be wondering, how do you guys put out so much material? And I'm thinking, like, if I was someone that was watching this for the first time and I had never put out any single book, I would think, how the heck do you put out a book in 22 days? How do you do a draft in 22 days? But if you look at just the numbers, it's actually pretty easy. If you're sit down to write for 2 or 3 hours a day, you can easily get 5 to 6 pages done, depending on your typing speed. I mean, I'm a pretty fast typer. But if you just sit down and write 5 pages a day for a month, you've got, I can do math, that's 150 pages. You do that for 2, depending on the size of book you're looking at, 150 pages for a book is actually pretty standard now. So you could get a book done, a rough draft of a book done every month.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more digestible to think of it that way too.
Yeah, which I know I'm a big word count guy when I look at writing.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sunshine. But I look at word counts. I kind of hit a word count every day. And when I wrote my first book, that's what my focus was. Every weekday when I got home from work, I'd sit down and write 2,500 words. And on weekends, I would write 4,000 to 5,000 words. And that very quickly adds up to being 80, 90, 100,000 words. It's not too difficult to do that once you get that schedule set up. And even now, I do the same thing. It's about 3,000 to 4,000 words every single day. And if I can knock that out, I quickly have a 90 to 100,000 word book.
Yeah, and for people that don't have that kind of time, 500 words a day adds up pretty quick too. It's really important to do it every single day. The projects that I work on, I used to only be able to do one or two things. I used to have a fiction and then my blog, which is typically nonfiction about something or other going on, and I would switch back and forth between the two to give my brain a break. And now I realize, like I said, I've been hearing advice about holding on to books and kind of releasing them a little bit closer together instead of more spread apart. So this year I've really been planning 18 months in advance instead of 3 months or 6 months or a year in advance. And I've been outlining a lot of books so that I'm able to just sit down and write and just pound them out when I have the time to sit down and pound them out, and getting a lot of stories kind of locked and loaded and ready so that I'm able to write pretty much all of next year without doing any of this research or back work or outlining or any of that. And I think it's going to be a good formula, but check back next year. That may suck.
Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but it's mentally taxing if you haven't written for a while, then you try to set yourself up on that schedule. Like I get exhausted when I took the whole summer off and then I sat down to start writing again. And after about an hour sitting in front of the computer, I'm so exhausted I could just go nap like every other hour. And I have to like push myself through that in order to be able to sit for a longer period of time and write. But then after about 3 to 5 days, the mental exhaustion goes away and I'm just in the zone. And then it's like clockwork. It's like a job. It's part of my routine and it's not a problem anymore.
Yep. Don't let your brain say no.
Yep.
Yeah, I always feel like the black sheep when talking about word counts though. Like that's just not how I work. The whole sitting down for a couple hours at a day thing has just never worked for me. When the creative juices are flowing, I always say like that's when I can type for like 8 hours at a time. So I again would say that's another one of the things of find what works for you. I know how I tend to write series. I have only one standalone book, and that's my middle grade fairy tale. So I always write whatever kind of fits together at the same time. Like right now I'm doing 3 books in a series, but I'm not necessarily outlining all of them even. It's just kind of when there's one little part that I'm like, oh, I want to do something with that in the next book. I'll kind of write everything that fits together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely write a lot of things at a time. I release relatively slowly, so I'm not quite at the degree that you guys are at yet. But I write a lot of things at a time, and I end up with lots and lots of notes. So I'm guessing that at some point I'll be releasing like 20 books at a time. But it's kind of nice because, as Summer was saying before, it is a good break to go from one book to the other. And my inspiration varies. So I'll have like my main collection that I'm working on, and then I'll have completely unrelated things. Totally different, and that helps with the focus that Joseph was talking about. And actually, to your point, Joseph, I had a similar situation where I used to play French horn, and I had to sort of make a decision: do I want to write in my spare time, or do I want to play French horn? And it was like I only went to a practice, like a formal practice, once a week, and then I couldn't really practice the rest of the time if I wanted to write. So I had to decide, and writing is what makes me the most happy, and that's when I really got that focus back. So I totally understand that. And so Jay already touched on this. I wanted to ask how far you plan ahead, and Jay was saying now he's reached the point where he's up to 18 months, right? That's what you said, Jay?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because that's what I've learned to do in my professional life, and found that it really makes me able to complete projects on time and set goals and really systematize whatever process it is that I'm working on. And it's worked really well with books too. I can't believe I didn't think of it before. I was always thinking 3 months ahead or 6 months ahead, or at the most a year, but that plan always changed. So yeah, I'm trying to look more long-term and make sure that I'm strategizing and optimizing every aspect of my author vehicle.
Planning is a really important part of being prolific, because if you don't have a plan, you can't get your books out there and people will forget about you. Because we live in a digital publishing sphere where people come and go all the time, it's just such a different world from what traditional publishing used to be, that it's just so important to have a plan, because people do have a very short memory. So like, I think I plan up to 2 years ahead of time with the Collapse series. That was 10 books. I planned about 4 years in advance just because it was such a big series, but everything else was about like 1 year. I love planning. So like my whole office is covered in calendars and notes and stuff. That's how I roll that way.
That's awesome. Do any of the rest of you plan pretty far in advance?
I do about a year out.
A year out.
I think I've got my next 15 books planned, so I just have to. And at that point, once you get the planning done, it really is just about process. You just like sit down and do the work.
Yep.
It's kind of like, getting in shape. If you're thinking about getting in shape, you just have to like buckle down and do it. I think that's something where, especially new writers, spend a lot of time thinking about writing, and thinking about writing is good, but at some point, if you just actually sit down and write, you'll be amazed. First off, you become better, you become a better writer, and you actually get stuff done. So I think if you have planning in general, I think is something that if you just take a couple of hours and think, what do I want? Like, how many books do I want to put out? How many books is this series realistically going to have? Is there sort of books that I want to write? But don't spend too much time thinking about it. Just have to, I think that could be a whole different episode of like, how do you actually plan for book series? But once you get the planning done, you have to actually just stop and do the work.
I think it's good to look at it. Oops, sorry.
No, go ahead, Sasha.
I was just saying, I think it's good to kind of compare that to outlining, your planning. And once you have that done, that's kind of the foundation for what you're going to start actually creatively writing. And I think it helps to kind of be able to get that all done, so you're not thinking about that and trying to write at the same time.
So once you have your general plan, I wonder if there's anything that you guys do to help keep yourselves on track. Is there anything more than just having the plan? Like, some people will say, yes, I'm going to set this word count, but they have a calendar where they write down what they wrote every day, what they accomplished every day, so that they can actually see it. It's not just in their head. Do you have any kinds of suggestions like that to help keep yourself motivated and on track?
That's a really good question.
I definitely do that, because I'm a planner. I have like my day planner, and I've got, this book will be done by this date, and I think it's important to do that, because if you're going to be working with editors and proofreaders and cover artists, they have schedules too. And if you have an editor, the editors that I work with right now, they only have a small period of time that they can fit me in. And if I want to work with them, I have to have my book in by this date. And I usually have to tell them, several months in advance, this is when the book's going to be ready, so are you able to fit me in? And there's been a couple times when I kind of went past my date, and then suddenly they're no longer available. So that was a good lesson. It's like, if it's the business world, it's the business part of writing. And it's not just you that is affected by your schedule.
I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a great question that I got asked one time, and it really made me think about things and changed the way that I did everything. Don't you have a plan for your day? It's like, oh, Oh, yeah, that really makes sense. And yeah, I've had a paper calendar for years. I haven't been able to switch over to digital, but a paper calendar, I've had that for years. And a few years ago, I started drawing a line up the middle and putting all the things that I need to do for work on one side and all the things I need for my books on the other side, and making sure that I check those things off each day. And if I don't, I move them to the next day and make sure I get it done then.
Yeah, paper calendars are the way to go.
I
I love
know, right? I can't. Yeah, I don't even want to try to get past it at this point.
I agree too. I actually use a paper calendar too for my stuff, and I keep track that way. Now I do have notifications on my phone as an alarm that pops up and says, "Josh, go write. Stop doing whatever you're doing," and so that gets me back to the computer. But my working document never leaves my computer screen. It's always the first thing I see every morning, the last thing I see every night. And I'm really big on plotting out my stories, so I always know what my deadline is in order to finish the book. Let's say I'm going to finish it on October 30th. I know I typically write like 1 chapter per day. I know exactly how many chapters my book is going to be, and so I start it in enough time to give me about a week wiggle room so that I'm writing a chapter per day and getting it done by that time frame. But I consider the same stuff Joseph is talking about. When are my designers ready? When do I need to start my marketing scheme and all those things so that everything's ready to go? So I finish at that date and I immediately move into the next process of publishing the book.
Yeah, I would suggest too, as far as kind of keeping track of word counts each day, there was, I just kind of tried it randomly in July. There's the 100K challenge. There was a Facebook group that I found, and that's a great way to kind of keep yourself accountable with other writers at the same time. And then like they, for example, have a Google spreadsheets where everyone could pop in the word count that they did for each day. So that was really good to hold yourself accountable, because if you put a big up and someone else has written like 10,000 words, that doesn't feel great. So I found that kind of helpful, even though I'm not a word count person.
That's a good one. I really like that idea, actually. Really like that. You reminded me of something that when you were saying, oh, before, I had wanted to just touch on that again. You had said, and a couple of people agreed that it can be difficult to get back into the swing once you've taken a break from writing. And I wanted to say that, like, a lot of, I have seen maybe authors writers who haven't published anything yet, they jump into it at National Novel Writing Month, right? They start in November, they just do NaNoWriMo, and that's the only time of the year that they write. And I think that for some people who are interested in it as like a hobby, that's fine. But I mean, I would think that if you want to continue, if you really want to publish a book, then you would use that as you could use it as a jumping off point or an inspiration or a push or something. But then to use that energy and go forward and not just leave it till the next November, I would think is really important. Do you guys have opinions on National Novel Writing Month?
I can't do it. Go ahead.
Sorry. I wrote my first novel, actually. My novel that ended up being published was actually a NaNoWriMo novel. And I had written lots of novels before, but it was kind of, I did it for fun to see if I could do it. So I like the idea of it, but it's kind of like anything else. Everybody gets middle book fatigue, I call it, where they, a lot of people, they make it halfway and they poop out because it's too much in too short of time, especially for a new writer. So in all, I think if you're serious about writing, there are better ways to go about it, maybe.
I've done it for I think 3 years. Well, I should say I've attempted it 3 years. I've actually only completed it once, because it is, even though it's like what I was just talking about, if you write 5 pages a day, you can get a certain, it's 150 pages done in a month. For some reason, it's the psychological aspect of like, oh my God, it has to be finished in this 1 month, that can put a lot of stress on you. I do really like the NaNoWriMo community though, and like the whole process of like putting in your word count every day and seeing how other people are doing and checking in with everyone else. I mean, the sense of community alone is worth doing.
Yes, I agree with that.
I've met a lot of people that way. And Joshua, did you say that you can't do that?
I can't. No, I can't do it. I do love the community there, but that's my downfall. I spend all my time talking to people and I never write. I signed up for it a couple of times, and I spend all my time like going in and checking people's accounts and chatting with people and going through social media. And it's just I'm more of just a solo person. I got to have my own time. I shut off the router and I start writing, so I can't even get on internet. So it doesn't work for me.
I was going to say, you seem to be doing it every month, so I'm not sure what you mean.
I started to do it last November, but ended up getting all kinds of busy, and then ended up doing other projects. And yeah, I think Summer would kind of probably like be able to suss out what I'm doing if I was going to do what I was thinking about doing on the next NaNoWriMo, which is work on 2 different projects, because that really is how it works best for me. I'll write half of a book and then I'll step away from it. Well, first I write the outline, step away from it, go back, read the outline, write the first half of the book, step away from it, go back, read the outline, read the first half of the book, and then it seems a much easier way for me to finish things and to polish it and to think of things that I might not have thought of before. So that's what I was thinking about doing, was splicing together 2 projects for NaNoWriMo, or having a 100,000 word book that I need to write and writing half of it, I guess.
Yeah, that's very much what I did for this July thing. I've never done it in November, but I wanted a push to get me finishing a project, and I still got halfway through that and just went, eh. But then this new idea came, so I went from a blank page, and I did end up writing a full novel by the end of the month. So,
and we have at least 2 writers here who have like notes like this. And I'm looking at you, Sunshine, and I'm looking at you, Joseph. And I really find that incredible. I have like a big Pinterest board. I have like an enormous amount of bookmarks, and I have lots of stuff in notebooks, but I can't plan as far ahead as you guys, and I really admire that.
Extensive notes are very important.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
World building.
So, on a different subject then, do you think it's a good idea to publish other things like short stories and poems and just shorter works between your books? Or do you think it's not worth your time as writing a full-length book?
I did in the beginning. I thought it was a really good idea starting out, which is something I still tell writers to do when they're first starting to get material out there, to kind of be known and build up a following and a fan base. You know, publish a big novel, get a few short stories out there in your first year, get another novel, get a few more short stories out, so you have regular content coming out. But I think I'm at a place now where I'm not so interested in getting short stories out there between my novels. I'm more interested in getting the full-length novels out. I don't know if other people have good advice on that, but I don't know that I'm so interested in doing it so much anymore now that I have a lot of full-length novels. I don't really want to move back to the short stories.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the writer. And I mean, part of it is where they're at, like Joshua was saying, but also part of it is, do you like writing short stories? Do you have good ideas for short stories? Are they in your world? Are they going to draw attention to your books? If the best thing that you can feel inclined to do is write the next book, then write the next book. If you feel like writing a short story, then do that. But make sure you're writing both of them and make sure that you're publishing them as quickly as you can, so that people do notice who you are and notice that you're actually working on this steadily.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I'm kind of the go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just started writing short stories again for a practical reason. I had a few people that wanted me to include work in anthologies, and my response to them at the time was, I'm sorry, I don't have any short stories. And at that point, I realized I was actually losing out on marketing opportunities because I didn't have short stories there. So I do have a few short stories that I've just kind of written. They're there just in case I get an opportunity to be included in an anthology, which is a really great way for you to expand your fan base, because you're mingling with other people, other authors and their fan bases. And it's a great opportunity to get new readers. So from that standpoint, short stories can be a really good tool.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm kind of the opposite of Joshua. I got sick of writing full-length novels and then decided to try short stories. I'd never written short stories before. I was a little intimidated by them because I'm more of an epic-minded person, which novels definitely work better for. But then, they're much easier to market, short stories. And I recently wrote a prequel to my entire first Dakota series, which I now give away for free, and it's a short, and that's a really good way to get people to then take a chance on an author that they've never heard of before, to read something short, and it's less of a commitment, and then if they like that, then they buy the whole series. So I think that's been really helpful for me to learn not only that, you know, a different marketing thing, but also just kind of a new thing to write. Like, I'd never done short stories before, and it was a good exercise in finding out kind of different ways that I can write.
Yeah, novellas are how a novella is what I consider to be a short story for me. So I've written a few of those, and I really enjoyed it too, because it's like you said, it's shorter, and like my novellas are usually 99 cents. So people take a chance on an author that maybe they haven't read before and they like it. So then they're going to go back and they're going to pick up your full length novel, and so, you know, maybe you've gained some new readers that way.
I guess that would be a good clarification, because I do still write novellas.
Okay.
I was thinking like 7,500 words and less.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Like
my
short
novellas are like 25,000 words. Or
Yeah,
less.
my novellas are like 25,000 to 40,000, and I still write those and put
Yeah,
those.
right in there. Okay.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. If you write that short story or novella within a series, then yeah, absolutely. That's definitely going to draw people in who wouldn't have seen you before. I think there are specific categories on Amazon for like a certain number of pages, even really short things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, Sunshine, you're bringing me into another topic I wanted to cover, which is, do you think that you should offer like a bigger price range between your books, like some for free, some 99 cents, $5.99? I know that there is a recommendation out there, you know, take this for what it is, but there is a recommendation that I've seen in multiple places that says it should be between $1.99 and $3.99. Of course, there are loads of books way outside of that, but do you think that your book should be mostly the same price, or should you be putting out stuff that has like a wider price range for people?
I know I go by length, and that's kind of what I do as a reader too when I'm buying books. Again, like I think if you have a kind of prequel kind of thing, and that's just a good thing to always have free, because if that's going to be your first thing that you want people to read. And then I go along with the Coda series, I have 99 cents just because they're shorter. And I've read like all sorts of marketing stuff too, where I've heard that the $1.99 mark is actually not a good price to price things. I don't know if anyone else has seen that, but I read a lot of data. I don't know if that was just for the genres that I write in. And then I just have my series $2.99 for all of the rest of the books, just because I don't really want to bump them up until, you know, people are reading them more and I have a lot more reviews to kind of feel like you earn that money.
There are some people who say that it's better to price your books as if it was a print book. And they, like, I'm talking about ebooks, of course. There are some people who say, you know, your ebook should be the same as a traditional published book. It should be like $8.99, $9.99, $10.99, something like that. And I know it's just a little bit like off topic, but at the same time, it's kind of on topic. What do you guys think of something like that? Do you think that you should keep it on the low side, or what do you think of pricing them higher?
I think that in traditional publishing, that us pricing our ebooks a little bit cheaper gives us an edge over a big six publisher. I don't think that it's necessary for us to price it so high, because also, you know, there's no printing involved. So it's, you know, and like I get letters from readers sometimes saying that 99 cents is too expensive for my book. So people would take it free if they could. So as an independent, I think pricing it lower, like again, that just gives us an edge, because we don't have a multi-million-dollar industry behind us pushing our books. So how can we compete? Well, we just price our books a little bit lower and we end up in the same spot. So I don't know. It kind of depends too, like you said, on the length of the book. So if you have a tiny short book, you know, you shouldn't be charging $10 for it, because nobody's going to buy it, or somebody's going to read it and get mad at you. So you got to kind of price it appropriately as well.
Yeah, that's totally how I go by the length of it. If it's a short story, it's either free or 99 cents. And yeah, when you get up to novella, I'd say $1.99 or $2.99, and yeah, just kind of as you go. Because as a reader, if I go on Amazon and read somebody's book and it's $2.99 or $3.99, and then it's 100,000 words, and then I buy another book of theirs and it's $2.99 or $3.99. It's the same price as the other one, and it's 20,000 words. I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of weird. So yeah, since I write a lot of different lengths of books and have a lot of different ideas and different genres, that I kind of price according to length, just like I do on a print book. But I still keep it. Yeah, I think $5.99 was the highest I've ever gone on an ebook. I don't think anything higher than that is called for.
There's a whole concept in marketing called psychological pricing, which is, I used to teach business courses, and I would always, the best example I ever had of psychological pricing was my mother. She was an artist, so she sold paintings. And she used to put her paintings in consignment shops, and she was a Bob Ross instructor, so it took her about an hour to actually do a painting, and she was wondering why her paintings weren't selling. So after about a month or so of not selling any paintings, she asked the store, what's your advice? They said, well, you're selling them for too low. You're selling your painting for $30, so they think it's a cheap knockoff, so they're not buying it. Add a zero to the end and people will start buying it, which is completely illogical, but it worked. She started selling them for $300 and they sold like hotcakes. I think that's like that $1.99 thing you were talking about. I think there might be some concept that $1.99 equals indie author, therefore don't buy, which is nonsense. $2.99, even though it's more expensive for some reason, completely illogically seems to be higher sales. And I can't tell you why. There's no logic behind it. It's emotional. There's some psychological reason for it. It does, however, take some experimentation, because it depends on how much your fan base likes you. How new are you? How recognizable are you? I definitely have books that I sell at 99 cents. Usually the first book in a series I make cheaper. I want to get you in there. I think free is good depending on the size of it. Novellas for free absolutely could work. I am not a fan of permanent free, especially for full-length novels. I'm sure everyone here knows BookBub. How many of you ever bought a free book on BookBub that you've never actually read? I do that all the time. Like every day I get these notices, here's another free book. And I get it. Usually I get it. It's like, oh, I like the cover. That's because I'm a cover designer. I like the cover. I put it into my feed and then I just never read it. So I'm not a fan of permanent free, but specials work. Again, it's a psychological thing that limited time only tends to get better results than this is free, it's here forever, just pick it up when you want to.
There's no incentive.
Yeah, there's no incentive.
My experience has been similar to what Joseph is talking about. I've actually had readers message me and tell me that my books were priced too low. And they were at $2.99, and I've moved them all up from that. But they said that I was selling myself short as an author, and that they needed to be higher, and they weren't buying my stuff because it looked like it was too cheap. And so I moved my prices up to $3.99, $4.99. I started selling more books, which I thought was absolutely crazy. But it was the same thing that Joseph is talking about. Now I do have some 99-cent books. I do run specials and stuff like that work out well. But I've always priced my stuff just like Jay and Summer and them were talking about at how long the book is. I have stayed away from the $1.99 because I've seen the same negative stuff on there. But I found by pricing my books more, I actually sell more now.
It's really interesting, and it also means that you have to sort of not just plan ahead, but really think, like put a lot of thought into it, like you guys are all saying, and really think of the consequences of what you're doing before you go pricing your books a certain way. You're setting expectations. You know, yeah, especially, yeah.
I've never felt comfortable though with like the $8.99, $9.99 ebooks. I've seen those and they make my heart cringe. But I will tell you, a lot of people will buy my ebooks for like $3.99, and if they like it, they then go and buy the print book. And right. So that is something to consider as well. Is that a lot of people will do that if they like the book enough, they'll go and buy the print to put on their bookshelf.
That's very true. And for me, even when I see a traditional book, like a traditionally published book, if it's an ebook and it's that expensive, there's just no way. I mean, I'm just going to get, like, especially if it's like fantasy or sci-fi or whatever, I'm going to go and get the mass market paperback for $5 and not the ebook for, you know, 8 or 10 or whatever. So yeah, completely agree. So on another topic, what happens if you're prolific, but you're separated by genre? You have like a number of genres that you want to write, and I know a number of you on the panel have already mentioned that you write different genres. So do you think that there's any problems with like putting out a lot of books but being split between genres? Do you think there's like a limit to the number of genres that would be best to put out? What are your opinions on that?
I'll tell you that when I wrote a paranormal thriller last year, or published it last year, and I had been warned that, you know, I should stick within my own genre, and I'm kind of mixed on the result, because I think what the problem was is I have a fan base based on, you know, I write epic and fantasy, epic and urban fantasy that are kind of YA appropriate, and then I wrote something that was completely different, and none of my fans wanted it. So the tricky part is I had to build another fan base. So which can be a good thing, but it's a lot of work.
And then be like super clear about what's what, I guess.
Yes. I think from a creative point of view, though, sorry, I'm interrupting you again.
Okay, good.
From a creative point of view, I have to write different stuff. I can't just write one thing. So I know I had to write that book, and I'm glad I wrote it. So, you know, and if you look at many writers write in different genres, you don't have to be stuck in one area. Just realize that it might be more marketing work for you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm just starting to get into that because I had one, you know, middle grade book that obviously didn't fit with the rest of my series at all, but that was just such a different thing that it's kind of own fan base already, but I just don't kind of deal with it because that's the only book that I'm going to do for that. So when I'm writing this urban fantasy one, that's kind of where I'm seeing like, okay, am I just going to carry over my same fans because they like me as a writer, or how much am I going to have to, you know, completely go in a different direction? So I think it's helped just joining different little Facebook author groups that are genre specific, so you can kind of see what waters you should be wading in before you try to publish the thing.
When do you guys think it's time to pick a pen name, if there is a time? I mean, I know that that's an opinion type of thing, but, you know, Joseph, I don't know. Did you consider doing a pen name at some point when you were having some trouble with your fan base not being interested in the one book?
I didn't. I think I probably would have had a better result if I did. I mean, I look at like J.K. Rowling. I mean, she's still putting out books, but she's not using, I think it's Robert Galbraith. I mean, we all know it's her, but it's a different name, and it helps set an expectation for the reader that this is not a J.K. Rowling book. I'll be honest, the reason I didn't is it sounded like too much work, and I'm a little bit lazy sometimes. So trying to maintain 2 different like websites and all the social media contacts, it just sounded like too much work. So that's the main reason why I didn't do it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I think that, you know, it really depends on what you're writing, and I don't know, it's to market once you've spent so much time building up everything for, you know, one series, to start over again is really daunting. And plus, I've always been of the opinion that the author is just as much of a product as the book, because your name is associated with whatever characters you're creating, and if you deviate, people will let you know. So in some cases, I think a pen name is definitely appropriate, but it looks like I haven't done it yet because I'm too tired. You know, just managing one name is hard enough. So
Yeah, I cannot imagine doing a pen name. I actually don't even write. I've tried a couple of books outside of my main genre, and they have not done well. Like I'm looking over here at Jay, like I don't know how he does it, because I've had newsletter subscribers tell me that if I start writing in different genres, they'd unsubscribe. I'd have to create a whole nother subscriber list and another newsletter and market differently based on that, and it would it would be exhausting. I don't think I could handle that.
Yeah, I think the people that end up needing pen names are the people that are writing more than 6 books a year. And I really still kind of had the old view of publishing, and that was part of why this year I decided to start 2 different series in 2 different genres, and then realized that no, that's not really the move right now. That's not really the way to do it. So they're both going to be kind of stalled so that I can release them more close to each other as I get ready to do them and the way that I think that I need to do them now. But yeah, the genre that I write in is not nearly as important as what I'm trying to write about, and that's the kind of readers that I'm looking for. So it doesn't really bother me to shift from one to another. I know that some of my readers don't read certain things that I write, but I don't know. I get more by writing in a new genre sometimes, and then they do cross over to the other things that I've written.
Yeah, I don't want to deal with another pen name just because people don't believe my real name is my real name. So I just don't want more work that way.
I was trying to think of Sunshine Somerville, but you can't really do like a play on it. It's just perfect. You can't. It's just leave it the way it is. It's good.
Darkville, if I just.
Oh. So do you guys think that certain genres lend themselves most to lots of books to being prolific and books coming out quickly? Are there some genres where that would not work as well? I think fantasy is just like auto expectations of lots of books.
Yeah, I know. I've heard of people releasing fantasy and science fiction books like one a month for several months, and it's like, but then again, if you think about it, you know, if you go on Amazon and you look and you see a book that looks interesting to you, and you see that it doesn't have the second or third book, even though it's implied that there's going to be a second and third book, are you more likely to buy it or less likely to buy it? And if you look at a book, are you really going to be like, oh, well, that dropped in September, this dropped in October, and this dropped in November, so these must suck? Or are you going to be more likely to be like, well, all the books are there, so if I like the first one, I'll be able to buy the other ones too? I don't think readers are really checking publication dates. And even if they are, they might understand that, yeah, you load things up in a certain way and release them in a certain way. And as long as they're quality, they keep on reading them.
I will say, and I'm not sure how many of you guys do like the cons and the signings and stuff like that, but that is a frequent question I get from people that come up to my booth is, when's your next book going to be out? How quickly do you write? Is there going to be something available soon? Because they don't want to wait a year and a half for my next book to be on the shelves for them to continue the series or continue the story. So I do think there is an expectation from readers that your fantasy novels are going to be on a regular scale. But I know that in the early days of publishing, when my first book was out, there were readers that said they weren't buying it until all the rest of them were done.
I've had that same experience where people say like, well, I'll wait until you finish the series, or, you know, there has to be a specific date for me to bother. And, you know, that's one of the reasons I haven't done like too much. I haven't put much time into advertising or anything like that until I had more than one book out for them to even, you know, see that I was going to continue to publish.
Do you get that even after you? All right, I'm going first this time. I was just gonna ask Christy, like, do you get that even though you tell them that they're not really a series, that they can stand alone?
I do. Yeah. Surprisingly, I had one person in particular, I had a whole Twitter conversation with them, and then, you know, they specifically said, well, when is your collection going to be done? And I said, like, at the time I had thought it was going to be 2019, like the whole thing would be totally rolled out. And she said, well, I'll just wait until then. And I was like, you're not going to remember by then. It hurts. And that's when I start thinking, like, you know, I don't know if I could handle this, but some writers do write a whole ton and then they just save it up, and then they release, like we were saying, you know, one book a month or however often they want to do it, and it's all taken care of. They don't have to worry. It's written, it's edited, it's everything.
No, I would love to do that. I started off with State of Emergency, and then I had people wanting to read the next one, and I've just been playing catch up for 5 years. I'm just writing as fast as I can. So I essentially, like, I'm dropping a book in my main series every 6 months and then everything else in between. But I just feel that if I could get ahead, my life would be so much better. I just can't quite catch up. I'm always on the run.
But that is a wonderful feeling when you have fans messaging you saying, "When's the next book done? I've been sitting here waiting."
That's true. That's very true.
I was going to say before, like we live in an age of binge watching because of Netflix. So, like, people want the whole story all at once, and that's especially with a younger demographic. They don't want to have to wait, especially because there's other material out there where they don't have to wait. So, from a writer's point of view, like I'm a little. I don't want to have to wait to get the book out to you. I want to get it out as soon as it's ready. But I think you're right. I think it would make sense if we could just like take a beat, book is finished, put it aside, do the next book, and then release them boom, boom, boom. It would make sense from a marketing standpoint if I could just write like 7 or 8 books all at once and then just focus, 4 or 5 months on marketing. I don't know if I have the emotional ability to do that as a creative person.
I agree.
I'm with you. I get it done. I'm like, I want to share this with you. Just take it. Yeah,
Yep.
I don't think I can just sit on it.
It needs to be like a GIF or something. We need that. So weird. Oh boy. Okay, well, actually, that is the end of our time. So thank you so much to everyone who's been in the audience, and thank you so much to our panelists. They're going to tell you where you can find them, and stay after that for sure so you can hear what's coming up for the Writer's Edge. So let's get started, and we'll go in the same exact order. Let's start with you, Sunshine.
Okay, first of all, thanks for having me. I am sunshinesomerville.com, and then you can find me. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm everywhere, YouTube. And I have, again, a new series coming out. The first one releases in December.
That's great. Thanks for being here. And next, Summer.
Thanks for having me as well. Summerlaneauthor.com is where you can find me. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter. I have a blog. It's kind of an online magazine where I interview authors almost weekly. I have a brand new book coming out in January 2018 called Resurrection, Shadows of Omega, and that will be the new series that will continue the journey of Commander Cassidy Hart from the Collapse series.
Really cool. Awesome. And on to you, Joseph.
You can find me on mjosephmurphy.info. All my social media links are on there. I do have a book that I'm working on, Backwards Pawn, book 3 in the Sword of Cassandra series will be out this year or early next year. I'm having a lot of trouble with this book, but it is coming, I promise.
I'm excited because I love your series. And on to you, Joshua.
My name is Joshua Robertson. You can find me at robertsonwrites.com. That's ROBERTSON WRITES. You can use the same name to find me on Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, all those wonderful things. Currently working on finishing up the 2nd book in the Blood of Dragon series. That is also the final book in the Blood of Dragon series. Should be out here in the next couple of months, and there will be a string of releases following right after that.
Very exciting. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here. It's always a privilege to just come up here and listen to you guys. I'm over here taking notes about everything that you guys say. So.
Yeah, I know. I learn so much every time I do this. And on to you, Jay.
You can find me at jnori.com. You can find me on social media as jnori. And you can join my Secret Society of Deeper Meaning, which is my newsletter. And if you join in the next couple of days, you'll be able to vote on pilot season and get to decide what story I share with newsletter subscribers next. And thanks very much for having me on here. And thanks very much, Joshua, for creating this and so many other things.
I'm glad that Christy was willing to take it over. I was at a place like Joseph was where I had too much on my plate and I had to cut some things loose to get back to writing. So thank you, Christy, for doing such a wonderful job. You've built this platform into more than I did. So it's a wonderful place to be.
It's awesome. Thank you so, so much. And I'm Christy Stratus. I'm your host of The Writer's Edge. I am also the author of Anatomy of a Darkened Heart and Lock and Key. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me at christystratus.com. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, just pretty much everywhere. And I do have, as I said, some news. Like I said, also follow me on Wattpad because I will be putting out a very short story this weekend. So the next The Writer's Edge panel is going to be on October 26th, and I'm excited about this because it's something very different. It's actually going to be part of the Dark Realm Diaries Halloween Hell Week. So if you're a fan of Halloween, if you're a fan of horror, we're going to be talking about horror up through the 1960s, which is going to include both films and books. And we have teamed up with Go Indie Now. This is actually Joe Compton's idea because they are going to have a panel the next night, that Friday, October 27th. And it's going to be about horror from the 1960s on. So that is going to be a lot of fun. I hope you're going to join us. And after that, I just want to tell you that the November panel is going to be early because of the American holidays that will be going on. So it's going to be November 9th. And it's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern time. So, you know, we'll see how many people are able to make it. Maybe it'll be even easier for you guys to get there. And this one's going to be a discussion on traditional publishing versus indie, which does sound like it's been done a lot before. But those on the traditional side that we're going to have include a Penguin published author and the executive director of Thriller Fest. So we're going to have some very unusual, different perspectives, which is going to be pretty cool. So again, thank you so much to our audience. Thank you so much to our panelists. This has been fantastic, and we will see you next month.